Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and before I get into today's video, which is going to be a discussion about the best possible outcome for the Republicans as well as the best possible outcome from the Democrats for 2020, and I know I've probably already done this maybe a week and a half ago, but I want to talk about why I think that and maybe make a few revisions. I want to discuss, first of all, the fact that if you read this 538 chat, they've determined that his re-election chances are about 50-50. Second thing, I want to talk a little bit about my model, or at least mention the fact that whenever Ipsos dumps a boatload of polls, from now on, I'm just going to average out everything rather than enter it all in at the same time, because if not, my poll gets not my poll, but my model gets really thrown off, and adding in 10 polls at the same time it weighs it poorly. And again, remember, I'm using only likely and registered voters, but it still weighs it too heavily towards one firm, which is going to be unfair to both candidates in all honesty. If they released one every day, then I'd be able to accurately input every single poll that they release. So, anyway, let me get into today's video, and I want to talk a little bit about the best case. So, of course, the starting best case for Donald Trump is going to be to win, and I'm using this as a, I'd be using my confidence margin. So this is my forecast, so I'll use confidence rather than that. So, of course, the starting best case for Donald Trump is to carry everything he did in 2016. All right? That's the start. So, let's talk about which states he would be most likely to pick off from the Democrats. First one, he only lost New Hampshire by about 2,000 votes. So he'd really only need to win New Hampshire. So that would be another big pickup. And I think 5 to 7% is his best case scenario. A 5 to 7% victory is his best case scenario. So I'll just use 5%. As it stands, Minnesota would definitely flip under those circumstances. Virginia isn't all that much more Republican leaning than the nation. And that's actually a 7% shift from 2016. That would be enough to flip Virginia into the Republican column. It would be able to flip Nevada and Colorado. So you may say, okay, well, that's the absolute max he can get. Well, not necessarily, because we have to talk about something called elasticity. And this is the concept that not all states shift equally when the national vote shifts. So let's say a state has a partisanship of R plus 5. So they're 5 points more Republican than the nation as a whole. Therefore, let's say the nation voted 2 points in favor of the Democrats. So 5 points more Republican means that the Republican would win that state by 3%. And there's, of course, a two-party vote share, assuming. So nationally, the Democrat won the two-party vote 51-49. That means the Republican would win the state by 3%, or 51.5 to 48.5, right? So, not every state is like this. There are a few states that are perfect, at a elasticity of 1, which means for every percent the nation moves, the state moves that many percent as well. But there are states with much lower elasticities, the Sun Belt primarily, aka states with high minority populations, but also very high conservative white populations. Basically the South. For example, in Mississippi, a Democrat's almost guaranteed to get 40% of the vote, but not much more than that because the Republican is almost guaranteed about 58% of the vote. Alabama is fairly similar, to be quite honest. Georgia is similar, but it's much closer. And this is why some of these states are called turnout, why the swing states that exist within the South are called turnout swing states, is because it's based off of getting your base turned out to vote, rather than convincing swing voters, like say in a state like New Hampshire, which is extremely swingy, or Iowa, which is also extremely swingy. But the swingiest state in the Union is based off of elasticity is actually Rhode Island, which has an elasticity of a whopping 1.4, which means for every point the nation moves, Rhode Island moves 1.4%. So that means that Rhode Island's swing is 140% the swing of the nation. So let's say Donald Trump wins by 5, right? That means that Rhode Island would swing by the nation swings by about 7%. That means 1.5 times that. So Rhode Island would swing, for starters, by 7%. But we have to add on that extra 40, and I'm just going to split the difference for that extra 2%, right? So I'm just going to add an additional, an additional 1. So that's 8%. Really? Sorry, no, that's an additional 3. Because that's 1%, but we also need that 40. 40% of 7 is about 3. So that means a 10% swing for Rhode Island. And since Clinton won it by 16%, we can assume that it's not going to go to Donald Trump, obviously. But that is well within the range I would call, because I would bring it down to a 6% victory. That would be a lean. I would not be very confident about. I mean, I'd be slightly confident about it, but I'm going to put it as lean just because it would be extremely competitive, and it's, again, a swingy state. So maybe Donald Trump is outperforming the state's swing, the state's elasticity. And by that measure, Connecticut is also pretty swingy. And it's slightly less Democratic than Rhode Island. So they'd wind up in about the same range. New Jersey is not nearly as swingy, high minority populations, but it's also not as Democratic as you would think. Delaware is not very is very swingy. I think it's at like 1.2%. Sorry, not 1.2. It's at about 1.2 for elasticity. But it's also a lot less Democratic than Rhode Island. I think Hillary only won this by 12, so that's 10%. And we're already putting in a 7% swing. 1.2 So that means about 7 plus another 1 to 2. Delaware would be a state that I would tilt to the Democrats in that scenario. Just barely, though. But a state that isn't very swingy is New Mexico. I'd probably only have this as lean, even though it's about similar in partisanship to New Jersey. Similar, it's not the same. Don't worry. It's a little bit less Democratic than New Jersey. Oregon and Washington, they're not particularly swingy, but they're also not inelastic. If I remember correctly, the least elastic state is, in fact, Mississippi or Alabama. I forget which one is the least elastic. But in a scenario where Donald Trump is winning by 5%, that's a 7% shift. I could see these states being competitive, at the very least. Certainly not Trump winning them, but they'd be competitive. Obviously, Donald Trump would carry Maine's at large, and the Democrats would probably not be doing too hot in that 1st congressional district if he's winning by 5% nationally. Again, Maine is a swingy state. And that's actually the funny thing about New England, is they're very far, they've got a lot of Democrats, not a ton of Republicans, but the Democrats don't reach 50%, and the independents make up a very large portion of the electorate, enough to where if a Republican did get them all, or almost all, they would win the state. But the Democratic base is so high that it's very difficult to actually accomplish that. So, yay. So that's probably the best case for the Republicans. Of course, the best case for the Democrats, as we all can probably guess, would be to carry all of New England by wide margins, of course carry Virginia by a wide margin, carry Colorado and Nevada by fairly wide margins, which they can do, carry Minnesota, carry Michigan, Wisconsin will still be close regardless of what happens, of course carry Pennsylvania, carry Florida. Arizona could be a toss-up, but at the best, it's only a tilt. I wouldn't even call it close to a lean. North Carolina, similar issue there. Oops. I'm just going to make sure that I've only got it in paint mode. Georgia, the best they can hope for is to get it close to within 1%. I could see the Democrats carrying Iowa and Ohio if they nominate the correct candidate, but both would be extremely close. Obviously, I could see them carry this district. Again, it'll be very close, though. Texas is just not something I can honestly say with any certainty could happen. Can maybe make the Dakotas and Montana look competitive, similar with Kansas and Missouri. Indiana, I think, is just too far gone. South Carolina could have the facade of looking reasonably competitive. Same thing with Mississippi. But that's really about the best for Democrats to hope for. It's actually difficult for either side to reach that 400 electoral votes as of right now, but we're getting into an era where that could happen because there is a lot of flux in the Electoral College as it stands. But we'll see how it breaks down, and yeah. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Bye.